Gonna get my sweets, which one will it be? Got the baker and the candy man crazy for me. Can't quite decide, will it be that one or this? Both of them competing to deliver my bliss. Give me lots of sugar till I make up my mind. Which sweet daddy makes the sweetest kind? Give me lots of sugar, melt my heart with your charms. Kiss the sugar off my lips as I...
Hey, and welcome to a special edition of Junk Food. This is Junk Food and You, and today we're talking with Dr. Sarah Wilner from the Lazaridis School of Business and Economics in Wilfrid Laurier University. She wrote a really interesting piece about size, about design, and everything like that, about candy. I'm going to let her talk about it and sort of give us a brief introduction. Sarah, can you tell us about what you just finished writing?
Sure. Thanks for asking about it. Well, a colleague of mine in the UK pointed this phenomenon out to me, and we became so intrigued by it that we ended up doing a whole study, which was they discontinued, Mars brand discontinued the king size format in the UK and replaced it with something then called the Duo. Now sometimes it's just known as Two, in order to allow people to share it or save some for later. And we thought, in our own experience, there's just no way that we would share a Mars bar or save it for later. So we started thinking about what the implications of that was.
And I mean, I've actually I read a bit of your paper and I found it really fascinating. I think there's probably two different angles to this argument a little bit. I'm sure there's what the brands are saying, the reason why they're doing it, and sort of maybe the real reason or the other reasons that might have come about. Did you find any of this in your research?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time that they did this, which was 2004 in the UK, but it's been done around the world since, including here in Canada, it was done for nutrition reasons on the part of the brand. They were... Not surprisingly, the British government noticed that there was a rise in obesity and children's health was at risk and all kinds of issues like diabetes. And we see this in North America too, right? And they were saying it's junk food. And specifically, they were calling out candy manufacturers. So the industry thought we better do something about that as fast as we can before we get regulated. And so that was their response. Now, I suspect, and the genesis of this article was the idea that it's unlikely that they really thought that people would switch from eating the king size to eating half as much. And one of the reasons that we find this particularly intriguing is they replaced the king size with the 2 bars of exactly the same weight and caloric value. So really all they did was chop the same thing in half, which any consumer could have done should they have wanted to share it or save some for later.
And I mean, as a candy person myself, I mean, I do share candy sometimes, but it's not a common trait, right?
Well, I do think it's unlikely when you're at the store to think to yourself, I better get a big one so that I can give some to the person sitting next to me. I mean, we might do that if we end up sitting with someone, and of course, sharing is an altruistic thing to do. It's just usually not part of that impulse purchase or the initial reasoning when you buy the product.
And I mean, I found it fascinating. This is something that I've sort of had a lot of debate about, the idea of the legalities that possibly governments put in about, sort of creating rules for snacks about their sizes and everything like that. New York City for a while wanted to ban sugary sodas off the city. And there was also a thing about... there was a talk about trying to ban candies or putting a higher tax on candy, which I found interesting because it was fascinating because they had the hardest time actually saying what was a candy. A cookie was not a candy, but, so a Twix bar was not a candy because it had a cookie inside it and things like that. Did you find anything about that while you were doing your research?
Not that specifically, but... the research is very much about how products and food products in particular have a lot of symbolic value. And so it's not surprising to me at all that you found difficulty in classifying or categorizing what counts as a snack, what counts as a candy, what counts, and that's because whatever the marketers say is not necessarily how consumers behave. And that's a fundamental truth that we have in the field of marketing. So, in other cultures, for example, dried seaweed is a delicious snack, but we would probably not find that to be a comforting snack in North America. So consumers are going to eat what consumers are going to eat, and they're going to find delicious and luscious what they're going to find delicious. For somebody, it might be jam, which has high calorie content, but they're not banning that as candy, right? So it's a symbolic issue about what is an indulgence and what is nutritious.
It's interesting how you talk about the differences between around the world and everything like that, because the amount of sort of the way snacking works, it is a really different thing. But the UK being sort of one of the first to do this, that's sort of fascinating on itself as well, because I would expect that to come out of potentially the United States first.
Yeah, you would think so. It was a time of government shift, and usually politicians, as we've seen in North America recently, need something to blame, need something to complain about. So they were talking about the health of children and families through the growing obesity epidemics. And actually in the UK, they have some of the highest levels of childhood obesity in the world. So it was not an unfounded concern. It was just simply, we wondered, is it really only about a candy bar?
So, I mean, it's interesting how the idea of politics and marketing sort of colliding in something like this. That's something that I found quite fascinating about this whole subject, that it does cross paths like that, you will have, based on an idea that comes into politics, then marketing has to sort of shift itself appropriately.
Yeah, and, politics often reflects a certain zeitgeist that the general population is feeling anyway. So if people are feeling anxious about their diets, as we know, given the whole diet food industry, many people are anxious about that, it makes sense that producers would want to reflect those issues in their offerings. What's really interesting to me, and what this paper was trying to get at, was my colleague and my initial response that it might be nice to have two sections of the same candy bar, but that doesn't mean we'd eat it any differently. Or as I often reflect, I might save some for later, but I'd still eat it on the same day, meaning the calorie count for the day would be identical, was that there's sort of a winking, knowing quality about this, that the manufacturers say, here, we're making it shareable for you, and the consumers are saying, gee, isn't that great? I appreciate it. I'll definitely do that. And then nobody does, and everyone understands that that's what's going to happen in reality. And so we've sort of come up with this theory that there's a seductive quality to what the manufacturers are doing. It's the sort of food equivalent of saying, do you want to come up for a drink? Nobody at the end of a date asks you to come up for a drink because they think you're thirsty. And both parties know that, but nobody says it out loud. And it's almost like, here's something for sharing. And somebody says, oh, that's great. Because when you're at the store, if you pick up a king size, you're a gluttonous person. But if you pick up a sharing size, now you're a sharing person. You're an altruistic, kind person. So we don't object to having that format change. It makes us feel and look better. But that doesn't mean it changes our consumption at all.
So that's interesting. Did you notice, particularly with the marketing that went behind this bar, was there actually sort of a push of saying, oh, it's time to share with friends, or did they actually change the marketing, or did they just change the bar itself?
Well, that was one of the really fascinating components when we went back. As I say, this happened in 2004 and onward, so it's over a decade ago. We thought that there would be a huge introduction. As an example, we give in the paper, when Heinz Ketchup changed its bottle format to not drip as much and to come out more easily, they did a huge campaign over it. Whereas this was, presumably a really fundamental shift in how the company was thinking about its offering. They did no advertising whatsoever. They did some public relations to show that the company was responsive to consumers' nutritional needs, but they did not advertise it. And the bars themselves just switched names. There are some cues on the bar about how to. There are two different things they did. One of them was they just showed that it was two pieces, and in another case, they changed the wrapper so that it could be resealed. And so there's a little bit of text and graphics showing how to reseal it. But otherwise, there was really no announcement made, which is one of the reasons we think that it's this winking gesture in which to say, you and I both know that you're going to eat this the same way, so we don't have to talk a lot about it. And the more we talk about it, the more you're going to think about how many calories are in this, so let's just not make a large splash about it.
Have you noticed this trend continuing with any other brands or going further with Mars?
Mars did roll it out throughout its product line. It's through Snickers and Milky Way and so forth. M&M's, absolutely. And all of the candy manufacturers followed suit. A number of brands, including Hershey's and Nestle, have done similar moves. We do see this in other snack sizes, and that was another point that we make in the paper, that the move to a 100-calorie pack of any kinds of cookies or chips was predated this move. And again, it was meant to help consumers do some portion control, but subsequent studies in consumer research have found that people tend to eat more because they think they're being so diligent about their calories and they're much more explicit. They tend to eat more than one package.
That's kind of fascinating because I'm somebody who eats a lot of treats, but I actually really try and limit myself. And sometimes I actually find it difficult to limit myself. I'm actually finding it more and more. I don't know if this is an actual trend or just something that I'm coming across, but where it's actually getting harder to buy smaller amounts of things. And it's almost getting to the point now where these duo bars are becoming the only thing on the shelf. Have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's true that there's a book that was put out by one of the executives. He's no longer there, but Crispin Porter Bogusky, which was the ad agency that did the Burger King campaign with the king in that unusual mask, this silent king. And he, after working on countless advertising campaigns trying to get people to eat more junk food, had a change of heart, left the firm, and wrote a book called The 11-Inch Plate. And it's about how portion sizes have changed over many decades, that everything that we eat now, particularly in North America, is just an exaggeration of traditional portions. And this, of course, was reflected in the film Super Size Me, right? That what we now think of as a small is what we used to think of as a large.
That's interesting. So, do you have any future sort of endeavors? Any thoughts about sort of what's the next step? What's in your writing and in your research
around this topic?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I was researching in this piece was how design has an effect on how we consume. And in this case, the design of the bar, the design of the packaging, and the graphic text communication. And that continues to really interest me. In a completely unrelated and yet related study, we're working now on something around the new cannabis industry in the States, where, like the Mars bar, the product is stigmatized until it changes form. And so there are a number of new product introductions that are coming out where recreational cannabis has become legal, like K-cups for coffee, single-serve coffee, that we wouldn't normally associate with a product like that, but make it more appropriate and legitimate for consumers to consume something that normally they might be ashamed of doing so publicly.
That's really fascinating. It is interesting, the psychology behind the marketing of something like that, as I don't think the average consumer really thinks about it that much, but yet we're affected by it quite a bit.
Well, that's what the producers are counting on. They're not going to think about it too much.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's it. Well, now we will.
I hope so.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate you're giving your time. It's a really interesting subject, and I think it's something that I think our listeners might start looking at their treats a little bit differently because of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other thing that's related. It is these Halloween snack sizes that are available year-round. So maybe that's the takeaway: is you should eat one of those tiny little snack sizes instead of the larger formats. I think
that's a great piece of advice. Well, I have one last question. I ask all of my guests this: what's your favorite candy?
Wow.
It's a tough one.
It is a really tough one. I don't think one of the things that I do adore, I don't know if it's a favorite, is a candy from my childhood that was discontinued in national production, but is still found regionally, which is a Mallow Cup.
Ah, Mallow Cups. I've had a Mallow Cup.
Yeah, it's a Pennsylvania-based company.
Yeah. Occasionally you find them in like specialty stores that do like, well, in Canada, it would be, sometimes you find them in like places that specialize in foreign stuff. They will have mallow
or
cups.
retro or nostalgia. Yeah, but that was, talking about volume of consumption. They had a contest when I was a kid, because I grew up in the States, where if you saved the card underneath the mallow cups, you could send in. You had to get like 100 points, and they were 5 points each. So my brother and I ate them every single weekend until we had enough. And when we sent it in and to see what our prize was, can you guess what it was?
Was it a mallow cup?
It was a mallow cup.
Awesome.
It was just a coupon for one mallow cup. So
it's like a buy 10, get 1 free thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for being our guest. And, if you have any other interesting topics like this, please send them our way.
I absolutely will. I appreciate your interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Junk Food and You, where we were talking to Dr. Sarah Wilner all about an interesting marketing trend where she dug into why Mars bars went from 1 to 2. If you want to learn more about our blog and listen to other podcasts that we've done, you can go to www.candycritic.org/junkfood and hear all about our other podcasts as well as our show, Chris, Why Would You Eat That? You can also follow us on Twitter @CandyCritic. And you can go to candycritic.org and find links to other things, our social media, keep up with our new reviews on Candy Critic and everything like that. So thanks again to Dr. Sarah Wilner for an interesting discussion, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Gonna get my sweets, which one will it be? Got the baker and the candy man crazy for me. Can't quite decide, will it be that one or this? Both of them competing to deliver my bliss. Give me lots of sugar till I make up my mind. Which sweet daddy makes the sweetest kind? Give me lots of sugar, melt my heart with your charms. Kiss the sugar off my lips as I melt in your arms. The candy man supplying new treats every night. Caramels and macaroons that taste just right. Creamy, dreamy truffles he makes just for me. Sweetness so powerful I can barely see. But the baker's got cream puffs that make me shake. Writes my name in icing on every cake. Delivers sweet jelly roll when work is done. He even lies and tells me I'm his only one. Give me lots of sugar, let it melt in my mouth. Got the best candy from the north or the south. Bake me sweet surprises that take me by storm. Got an oven so hot it will always be warm. Give me lots of sugar 'cause it gives me a smile. For your sugar I would walk 1,000 miles. You know if I can't get it I'm as blue as can be. Sweet daddy got to give all of your sugar to me. for me. Sweetness so powerful I can barely see. But the baker's got cream puffs that make me shake. Writes my name and I sing on every cake. Delivers sweet jelly roll when work is done. He even lies and tells me I'm his only one. Give me lots of sugar, let it melt in my mouth. Got the best candy from the north or the south. Bake me sweet surprises that take me by storm. Got an oven so hot it will always be warm. Give me lots of sugar cause it gives me a smile. For your sugar I would walk 1 dozen miles. You know if I can't get it,